The first sound is breath, ragged and stubborn, a small boy's chest lifting against a shirt darkened by road dust. His mother, Safia, runs through the hospital's front gate with him cradled in both arms, her bangles thudding like a second heartbeat. The sign above the entrance flickers Gulshanabad District Hospital, English and Urdu sharing a tin border, while a chalkboard nearby lists fees that climb like a staircase. Inside, the air is tiled and cold, the old paint the color of boiled milk. There is a door with a glass panel stenciled billing and admissions. There is a counter. There is a ledger that catches everything. Names, dates, the cost of time. Safia reaches the triage desk and finds a nurse, Farzana, who presses 2 fingers to the boy's neck. Pulse present. Pupils uneven. Breath shallow. Farzana's voice is calm, though her eyes aren't. She calls for a gurney and an oxygen cylinder, then glances at the signboard's last line, "No treatment without deposit." It sits like a stone in her mouth. She wheels the boy toward emergency and meets the doorway with the gurney's squeak. But a clerk is already there with a carbon copy pad and a small red stamp like a square of coagulated blood. "Form 17B, the clerk says, as if asking for a handkerchief. "National ID, initial deposit, signature." "My son cannot breathe," Safia says. "He was hit on the ring road. He fell under a motorbike." "Signature," the clerk repeats and lifts the stamp. Farzana knows the policy is a gate, dressed as a rule. She has broken it silently before, in smaller ways. Quick pressure on a wound before the family finds money. A saline line threaded with a prayer. But today the clerk is not alone. A man in a slate gray shirt steps from the office beside billing and admissions, and the clerk straightens as if measured by a ruler. The man is careful in the way of people who count cash for a living. He carries a black notebook with corners rounded by use. His hair is well combed, his jaw tight. "What is the case?" he asks, eyeing the boy. "What is the deposit?" 10,000, the clerk answers. "Head injury. The man's name is Tariq, the department's head." He looks at Safia, looks through her, and then he recognizes something like a shadow of a past. A schoolyard, a cricket bat, cheap mango ice shared in summer. For a breath, his face softens. "Safia?" he says, though he already knows. He grew up in the same neighborhood, returned from the capital with an ironed degree and an ironed conscience. He was the clever one then. He is important now. "I have no money," Safia answers, choking on the words as if they were smoke. "Please," Tariq nods to the clerk. The stamp falls, red on white. No treatment without deposit is not law, not even policy, merely an instruction that grew teeth in a place where the budget comes late and salaries come later. Behind Tariq's insistence sits a wall of unpaid bills and a rumor that the department's collections cover the shortfall. Behind that rumor sits a commission no one mentions, a motivation. But in this moment it lives as a door. Farzana, thin as a cotton reed, stands between that door and a child's breath and feels the door's wood press the bones of her hands. "Give him oxygen," she says finally, and the orderly brings the cylinder. The mask hovers above the boy's face. It is not attached. The tube dangles like an accusation. The clerk clears his throat. "Deposit." The hallway hums with the ward's fans and the murmur of relatives. Someone whispers that they saw the leader's convoy pass the bazaar at dawn, that he is visiting the district office today, that he is the sort who reads the small print and signs with a blunt pen. But rumors move faster than convoys. Safia opens her purse and finds coins, a folded 500 rupee note, a receipt from a school uniform shop. She feels the ledger's weight even without touching it. She looks up and sees, for a moment, that the man with the black notebook used to tie kites for her little brother. That old friend is now the door. Farzana inhales once, a long, steadying breath, and pushes the gurney an inch forward. The rubber wheel kisses the threshold. "We are losing time," she says to no one and everyone. The boy exhales with a whimper, a sound small enough to fit into the ledger's narrow lines. The story would stop here if breath had no advocates. Instead, a phone buzzes in the clerk's pocket, and in the gap before he answers, Farzana's hands move faster than the stamp. She opens the oxygen valve, the width of a fingernail, slips the mask to the boy's face, and the hiss is the sound of a new paragraph. The clerk barks. Tariq's jaw clenches. Safia's eyes widen, and the door for the first time today quivers on its hinges. The rumor of the leader becomes a shape in the street, tires crunching gravel, a motorcade that loses its arrogance as it nears the hospital gate and slows before a crowd that has already gathered without planning. Auntie Nazreen from the spice lane leans on her cane and works her phone like a tambourine, tapping a WhatsApp message to the Gulshanabad Mothers Group. Emergency asking for money before oxygen. Boy, head injury, pray, speak. Her voice to no one becomes everyone's voice. Screens wake. Screens pass hands. Someone tags a local journalist whose face is mostly his mustache. Someone else says Tariq is a good man, just strict, and that strictness is what keeps the roof from falling in. Another replies that strictness is a coat you hang excuses on. Inside, the clerk recovers his phone and the red stamp, places both on the counter like twin pistols. The oxygen hums, the boy's eyelashes tremble. The clock above the door knows the weight of minutes. Farzana squeezes the boy's hand and calls for a doctor. None are immediately free, and so she does what nurses always do, gathers the loose ends of the system and makes a rope sturdy enough to pull someone back. She orders mannitol, requests a cleaned suture set, and asks a junior nurse to call neurology in a tone that is both question and command. Tariq steps closer, his voice low and splintered. Farzana, stop the oxygen until the deposit is made. We cannot make exceptions every time someone looks poor. He turns to Sophia. Sister, you know me. You know that if we let one through, 10 will push the door, then 20, and we will have no control. The ledger must balance. My hand is not free. Neither is his lung, Farzana answers, and feels her own pulse in her throat. Sophia looks at Tariq and sees not a monster, but a man trapped in his own sums. She knows him from school, from standing in line for sports day, from a morning when he lent her a pen. She looks at him now as her son's breath scratches at his ribs, and she recognizes that an old friend caught in a machine can become a worse enemy than a stranger because he knows which memories to weaponize. Let me pay later, she says, holding up her ID, its edges soft from years in and out of plastic covers. I stitch clothes for the teachers at Halima High. Ask them. I will pay. Tariq lifts the black notebook. Inside are columns bordered in blue ink, numbers neat as soldiers. Each page bears names in careful cursive, attached to fee codes and a small symbol near the margins that only insiders know. Pending, one caret means. Partial, another. It is a ledger, but it is also a map of hesitations, of who is allowed to breathe on credit and who is not. He flicks to the current week. We have 63 pending, sister, he says. 63 breaths I have already borrowed from the future. He closes the book softly. I cannot add another. The crowd by the door thickens. The journalist's mustache appears behind the counter's glass, and his pen moves, even when no one speaks. Auntie Nasreen's message has flowered into a chain of gossipy compassion that walks faster than fear. A junior doctor finally arrives, hair uncombed, stethoscope a question mark around his neck. He looks from Farzana to Tariq to the boy's face and chooses the oath he took instead of the instruction he was given. We treat, he says, but the words fall short of the authority needed to make them real. The oxygen mask fogs with each of the boy's breaths, uneven and stubborn. It is as if the building itself leans toward a decision. The metallic frame of the door gleams like a knife. The stamp sits like a dare. Safia kneels to be level with her son and whispers his name, Hamza, as if names have the power to lace torn minutes back together. Tariq's phone vibrates again, this time with a message from a number labeled simply Aid. He stares. The text is short. Convoy arriving. A complaint has been registered. He looks at the red stamp, at the ledger, at the nurse standing in defiance with her hand on the valve. He imagines this making him the hero if he allows it, imagines it making him the scapegoat if he does not. The system that has protected him all these months suddenly feels like an exposed wire. Outside, a siren coughs and stops. The leader steps from the car not with the swagger people script for him, but with the gravity people do not know how to read. He is shorter than the posters, taller than the gossip, and the first thing he does is remove his sunglasses, as if to say the eyes are on you, but also I will use mine. He enters the corridor and the crowd parts, not from fear, but from need. He sees the door. He sees the oxygen mask. He sees the ledger. He takes a breath, the kind that puts distance between anger and action, and every person in the hallway, even those who don't like him, mirrors him without knowing. The air changes temperature, slightly, and the escalation has nowhere else to go but forward. He does not shout. He does not perform. He walks to the counter and places his palm on the glass, as if it were a lake he intends to cross. The aide, Jamal, appears behind him with a thin tablet and a notebook full of poorly stapled clippings. The leader nods at him once, and then looks at Farzana and gives her the smallest of gestures, an opening of the hand. She doesn't wait. The valve turns. The hiss becomes a line, a continuous thread that stitches the boy to the present. The junior doctor is already lowering his shoulder against protocol, calling for a CT, sending a porter to push. The leader turns to the ledger. He lifts it, heavier than it appears, and studies the columns. Numbers are a kind of story with less poetry and more knives. He finds the symbol only insiders know and looks up at Tariq. The recognition is a flicker, private and dangerous. They were boys once, side by side at a chalkboard. They learned to write the same letters. They learned to hide the same fears. In another life, they might have solved this in a tea shop with a single napkin. He places the ledger down and speaks, as if from that other table. A hospital is not a marketplace, he says. A boy's first right is breath. If we cannot guarantee that, we should unscrew the sign and say so plainly. Tariq feels something old and tender tremble. He sets his jaw against it. Sir, we have to survive, he answers, respectful, measured. The budget settles late. The district owes us for last quarter. The suppliers will not hand cylinders for IOUs. The rule is not a cruelty. It is a bridge. If we let the flood through, the bridge collapses. The leader nods, not because he agrees, but because he has spent hours under bad roofs. He looks to Jamal. How late are the transfers? How much are pending? Jamal taps his tablet and pulls numbers like wire from a wall. 41 days, sir. Average delay. Pending reimbursements. 8,300,000 rupees. Supplier credits expiring next week. 3. Who turns the valve? The leader asks, and this time he is looking not at oxygen but at leverage. Sir? Farzana says, surprised to hear her voice stand in a room like this. We're trained to stabilize first, but the admissions gate blocks our hands. It has become the first procedure. She keeps her eyes on the boy, on the movement of his chest. It steals minutes. The leader steps away from the counter and into the center of the corridor. Not grand, just enough for everyone to see his coat sleeves are plain. He speaks the way a person speaks when he finally understands which hinge holds the door. From this moment, in this hospital and in every hospital under my watch, we will reverse the sequence. Treat first. Bill later. We'll call it breath before billing. The words are simple, and their simplicity is their blade. Triage and oxygen are to be immediate. Stabilization has priority over paperwork. Deposits are for beds, not for life. Tariq opens his mouth, but the leader is not done. And because rules without paths are poems, we will create the path now. Jamal, establish an emergency fund for immediate costs, seeded from discretionary. Call the finance director and tell him we will backfill from the social protection line item. There's a clause for catastrophic care. We will read it the way it was intended. Suppliers will be paid from that fund with a signed voucher from the on-call doctor and the nurse who initiated care. No more commissions tied to collection. Any incentive must point toward lives saved, not pennies captured. There is no applause. This is not a rally. What there is, instead, is a collective exhale, noisy and human. Breath before billing is a phrase people can hold in their mouths. The junior doctor is already on the phone to radiology. The porter appears with a cart. Safia bends to kiss her son's forehead, and her tears slide into his hair, each drop a private receipt of the moment. Tariq stares at the ledger as if it might protest. Part of him is relieved, the part that remembers mango ice. Part of him is wounded, the part that built his authority on being the door. He forces himself to speak carefully. Sir, with respect, this will invite misuse. Relatives will invent emergencies to bypass the desk. Our costs will bloom. Without careful accounting, we will be a charity. The roof will still leak. We will be a system, the leader replies, quiet, sure. And systems are held by light. Jamal, draft a one-page order as we speak. Farzana, keep breathing into that mask until the oxygen cylinder commits it to memory. Tariq, help us build the ledger that begins with breath. The corridor shifts from debate to motion. Jamal types a draft, ugly but alive, and the leader signs with a blunt pen the way rumors promised. He turns to Safia. You are not our beggar, he says, not loudly, and she nods as if returning to a country whose border she crossed accidentally years ago. He turns back to the door, the sign, the stamp. He lifts the stamp and places it gently into the drawer, closing it with a quiet click that sounds like a gate deciding to be a gate no more. The intervention is not a miracle. It is a correction, and everybody in the hallway knows that corrections are only as good as the hands that keep them still. Corrections require confidence, but they survive on proof. Within an hour, Jamal has converted the draft into a typed circular, numbered and dated, with a 3-sentence preamble that reads like a threat and a promise. Immediate life-saving care shall precede billing in all district hospitals. Deposits shall not delay oxygen, triage, or stabilization. The emergency fund shall reimburse documented interventions within 72 hours. He pushes it to WhatsApp groups for hospital staff and to a Telegram channel where junior doctors rage anonymously. He also walks printed copies to the bulletin boards where old orders go to molder, pinning this one with 2 thumbtacks like a certificate of baptism. But change breathes only when exposure names the broken mechanism. Jamal spreads the ledger pages on a table in Tariq's office, along with admission logs, deposit vouchers, supplier invoices, and a report from finance that smells faintly of toner. Farzana writes names and times on a pad, the boy's arrival, the minute the mask hissed, the gap before the doctor came. The leader stands by the window and watches the courtyard, where the crowd loosens into bored lines, people already returning to their errands. Auntie Nasreen, magnified by the glass, leads a small chorus of market women in prayer that sounds suspiciously like a complaint with better melody. "Start where it hurts," the leader says, and Jamal nods. He shows a chart where door-to-oxygen times jump at lunch and at shift changes. He has circled each spike in red ink. He clicks to a screenshot of a memo where someone in procurement suggested suppliers be prioritized if they facilitate timely deliveries. He scrolls to a WhatsApp chat in which a junior admissions officer wrote, "No deposit, no treatment, strict orders, don't get me in trouble," and a nurse replied with a skull emoji and then an apology. He lays out a printout from the Finance Ministry's budget book, Clause 1244C, which allows an emergency draw for immediate life-saving measures. He highlights it with a marker that bleeds through. The broken mechanism is no longer a rumor. It is a sequence of small decisions presented in a row, like primed matches. Tariq stares at the commission line that Jamal has extracted from a pivot table. 3% on collections, a motivation introduced during a cash flow crisis and never retired, handed out quietly as envelopes at the end of the quarter. It is not grand theft. It is a petty gatekeeper's sweetener, the kind that turns a man into a door because the door feeds him. Tariq feels shame drag across his chest, heavy and scraping. He has told himself the commission kept the lights on. He has told himself the staff worked harder because of it. He has told himself thieves wear masks. He wore a tie. The leader does not gloat. He does not accuse. He reads aloud from the ledger the names of the pending 63, each a story folded into a number. He pauses at a line where the margin symbol for partial is next to a name he recognizes. A night watchman from the old municipal library. Breath feels like a currency without a bank. He turns to Tariq. "This is where we speak truth before we speak policy. Did you benefit from this structure? And can you help us dismantle it?" Tariq does not look away. "Yes," he says, and the word hits the wall and comes back wearing its own echo. "I did. I told myself I was a bridge. I was a gate." Farzana exhales in a way that is not victory. It is a sadness that has finally been named. Jamal resumes, gentler now. He shows a table of denials in last 24H, paired with complaints resolved, numbers that do not add up because most complaints never entered the book. He produces a snapshot of the complaint desk's log, a single page for an entire month, written in the same hand, curious in its neatness. He reads the phrases that recur like a chant. "No doctor available, pay first, come tomorrow." He prints a copy of the breath before billing circular and places it over the log as if laying a transparent template over a flawed drawing to suggest a new outline. The leader dictates an order to Jamal for a week-long audit, not of people, but of pathways. "We will map the journey from door to breath, and we will measure every hinge," he says. "We will ask patients for their times, not just staff. We will do surprise drills in the evening when rules sag. I want the gaps to be facts." He pauses. "And we will open a complaint channel that leaps over the desk. A number, a QR code, a promise that each complaint receives a response within 8 hours, even if the response is, 'We are looking.' Breathe while we do. It is a sober room. No one is saved by applause. But clarity has weight, and that weight rearranges the furniture of the mind." Tariq reaches for his black notebook and places it on the table, open like a confession. "I will show you the columns," he says, "and the symbols only we know. I will tell you which supplier calls which clerk. If you must cut a head, cut mine. Just dismantle the machine we built around my pride." His voice breaks at the last word, and even the aide who has seen messier rooms looks at his shoes. Exposure is mercy that stings. The leader nods and orders tea that neither of them drinks. Outside, in emergency, the boy is in CT. Safia sits with a cup she does not remember receiving, her hands remembering instead the garment seams she has sewn to hold the world together. The hospital's public address system coughs and asks for blood donors in O negative, and 3 men stand simultaneously, 2 of them friends, 1 a stranger. Breath before billing has entered their mouths as a phrase people test on their tongues. The investigation moves from prints to faces, from clauses to habits, and the exposure names what everyone secretly knew. The door was real, the door had a keeper, and the door took its fee in minutes. Reform is a quiet scaffolding erected in the open. The first pole is the rule itself, dressed not as philosophy, but as a simple sentence, breath before billing. It prints cleanly. It fits on a sticker. It fits on the back of an ID badge. It is painted above the emergency entrance in letters that an uncle could read without glasses. The second pole is money, because rules eat. Jamal sets up the emergency care fund with a ledger that begins at 0 at 8 in the morning and ends at 0 the next dawn. Replenished daily through a transfer authorized by the finance director, buffered by the Social Protection Clause, 12.4c. The signature cycle is shortened by shrinking the desk it must cross. A doctor, a nurse, and the duty administrator sign the voucher. Uploaded as a photo to a shared drive where the finance team sees it in real time. The fund is visible on a public board by the entrance in 3 lines. Door to help minutes, denials last 24 hours, and complaints resolved. The numbers change by hand at the start. Chalk squeaking as a clerk writes 7, then erases it to make 6 after a drill goes well. Families point at the board as if it were weather. They kill the perverse incentive before it grows teeth again. Collections are no longer a hunting ground. The commission line is erased, and in its place appears a small allowance for night shift meals tied to the number of emergency cases stabilized, not the rupees captured. The memo that announces this is short and not triumphant. It simply says, "We feed those who hold breath at night." Tariq signs it. He feels the pen heavy, as if he is using it to carve an apology into wood. An internal circular bans any request for deposits for oxygen, triage, or stabilization, with sanctions that fit the offense. A day's suspension for a first violation, 2 weeks for a second, termination, and referral on the third. If it ever comes to that, the leader says, we will say the word termination softly and regretfully, but we will say it. The complaint channel appears as a blue poster with a QR code that even the old aunties learn to aim at. Its number also printed in bold for those with phones that belong to a simpler era. A small team cycles through the messages with a service-level agreement that forces dignity to keep pace with anger. 8 hours to respond, 48 to resolve or escalate. They post weekly summaries near the canteen. Received 31 complaints, 27 resolved, 4 escalated. Written with dry humor by a junior clerk whose penmanship has saved worse days. Names are redacted because dignity likes shade, but patterns are not. When 3 complaints mention a nurse, Farzana asks to speak with her, and the conversation is not a trial, but a teaching. Training is embarrassingly simple on purpose. They run drills in the courtyard with gurneys and stopwatches. Porters become athletes. Clerks become referees. A bell rings, and a volunteer collapses convincingly. Nurses tie tourniquets and swap oxygen cylinders that hiss with pride. They rehearse at odd hours when the body wants tea and gossip. They call it the 5-minute habit. At first, people snicker. By the third drill, snickers turn to competition, and someone paints a small line on the wall at the 5-minute mark because bodies like lines to chase. Above the line, a banner. Breath before billing. Door to help, 300 seconds. Enforcement becomes ritual, not spectacle. The audit plays out with light feet and wide eyes. Jamal prints heat maps of delays and uses colors no one can argue with. He invites the community to witness. A representative from the Market Association, a school teacher, a driver from the bus depot, and gives them tea while showing charts. Auntie Nasreen arrives without invitation, carrying samosas that ruin the careful pastries on the table, and nobody stops her. When the audit finds a pocket of old behavior, an admissions clerk holding forms like tickets, Tariq is the one who interrupts. A small dignity that matters the way one hinge matters to a door. He sits with the clerk and says the words he has rehearsed in his head. We will not be that hospital. We will be this hospital. There are consequences, and they are not bloodthirsty. One clerk is suspended and returns with a humility that looks like a hem mended by a careful hand. A supplier who over-invoices is told the new terms and, after bluster, signs anyway because light is bad for overcharging. The junior doctor, who once looked away from a gasping man and found a different patient to treat because paperwork made the first one difficult, asks to lead a night drill and does it well. The leader holds a monthly culture check in the canteen, unadvertised and unfilmed, where stories are told without microphones. He attends 2, sends Jamal to the others, and the presence, inconsistent and human, suggests confidence, not theater. At the board, the numbers start to matter the way a family calendar matters. Door to help falls to 4 minutes, then 3, and hovers there like an ambitious sparrow. Denials in the last 24 hours drop to 1 and stay at 1, and then, on a good Tuesday that reminds everyone of rain, to 0. The complaints resolved line refuses to be 0 because people always find something to fix, which becomes a point of pride. The leader allows himself a small smile at the sight of boredom beginning to settle like a quiet rain. System change is never a spectacle. It is an accumulation. The boy, Hamza, comes out of surgery with a scar that will anchor future weather changes. Safia brings a tray of sweets that tastes like victory and relief and terror remembered. Tariq eats one and almost chokes on his own gratitude. He has become, he hopes, a hinge. Months later, the board's chalk dust lives under the fingernails of a clerk who used to measure days by deposits. The words, "breath before billing," have faded from the banner outside. Sun-bleached into a soft motto that belongs less to the leader and more to the building. 5 competing stickers preach the same thing on the backs of ID lanyards. Staffs rub them absent-mindedly like talismans. No one notices the drills anymore because they happen on time and leave no gossip behind. Security guards, once gatekeepers, now greet stretchers the way ushers greet congregations, hands outward, a practiced smile. The oxygen cylinders line up like obedient soldiers, valves polished to a dull shine, and the sound of their hiss is no longer drama but the background music of a functioning place. Tariq still carries a notebook, now blue instead of black, not because color saves a soul, but because a new ledger deserves a new shade. The columns are not soldiers but gardeners. One tracks reimbursements from the emergency fund, ticked off daily with a small stroke that looks like rain. Another lists suppliers paid on time, the list longer than anyone dared hope. There's a column for door to help outliers, where he notes the few days the number drifts above 5 and writes next to the date, the cause, and the fix. It is not glorious work. It feels like sweeping the same corridor every morning and finding it clean by noon. He lives there willingly. Farzana teaches new nurses with a patience that breaks and rebuilds them. She carries a stopwatch and a soft voice and a story about a boy whose breath waited at a gate that was removed. She never says his name unless asked, and then she says it like a blessing. She shows them the doorframe's small scratch, where a gurney used to hesitate. She tells them the lesson the door taught them, that a hinge is a promise that the door can move. She tapes the breath before billing order inside the medicine cabinet and tells them to read it when they think they have no power. The complaint channel has become part of the furniture, like a window people open without thinking when the air is stale. The SLA holds because a junior clerk named Rehan takes pride in texting back strangers with phrases that sound like someone is at the desk again. The summaries by the canteen still roll each week, same 3 lines, same dry humor. People glance and move on. The metric board's chalk lines are less careful now because carefulness has been transferred to the work itself. Door to help minutes sit at 3 like a stubborn friend. Denials hover near 0 with the occasional blip that produces a conversation, not a scandal. Complaints resolved has a new column called Thanks Received, which embarrasses everyone and secretly powers the night shift. The reform travels without buses. The maternity ward copies the board, then the orthopedic clinic, then a clinic in a village 2 hours away that hears about it in a telegram thread and paints its own banner. A driver for the intercity bus company tells his depot manager they should try a seat-before-ticket policy during rush hour so families aren't crushed at the window. A registrar at the school office writes, "Enroll before dues," on the glass with a dry erase pen and watches the flood turn orderly. These are not the same as oxygen, and they know it, but the habit forms. Reverse the sequence where life is at stake, measure what matters, file vanity in the dustbin. The leader visits rarely. When he does, it is unannounced. He sits in the canteen, drinks tea he insists on paying for, and asks about boredom. He says it with a smile because he knows boredom is a synonym for safety when you get it right. He listens to the stories that now sound like maintenance logs, a printer jam, a supplier with a noisy truck, a night when the generator coughed. He nods and leaves without speeches. He has learned that culture is cheaper than signage and more durable. One evening that tastes like rain, the hospital hosts a small gathering. Not a ceremony, not a show. Safia brings samosas. Farzana wears the same quiet shoes. Jamal carries a newer tablet and a softer laugh. Auntie Nazreen arrives first, like a herald who owns the way a room starts. People sit in plastic chairs that complain when men stand. A curtain moves with the night breeze, and somewhere a child cries because children cry everywhere and always. Tariq stands to speak, and his voice catches on the first word. He says he found his enemy in a mirror, and then he found a hinge. He says he is sorry to those who needed breath and found a desk. He says he brought back the black notebook, emptied of numbers, because an object should testify. He lays it on the table like a stone and removes his pen, which is only a pen again. The ending leaves everyone in tears, not because of a speech, but because of a small scene no camera would catch. Hamza, his scar a neat comma over his temple, tugs at the corner of the old black notebook and writes his name on the first page. The leaf crinkles. He shrugs, as if to say paper is for writing, not for walls. Safia laughs into her hands. Farzana wipes her face with the back of a wrist knotted by years. Jamal, sentimental against his will, clears his throat. Even the leader's eyes shine in a way only his aide notices. After that night, the notebook sits in a glass case near the admissions desk, not as a trophy, but as a warning. People point at it the way pilgrims touch a threshold. The days unspool into their steady length, each with its drill, its chalk, its tea. The breath before billing banner bleaches a little more and will need repainting soon, which someone will do without a meeting. The door at emergency still swings. It always will. But the hinge, oiled by habit, held by metrics, guarded by ordinary workers who know the feel of a valve and the sound of a stamp shut away, holds. And breath, which once bought its right to enter, now walks in first as if it belonged. And as the credits settle like evening light across the ward doors, thank you for walking with us, through breath withheld and breath restored, through systems mended by ordinary courage. If this story moved you and you want more justice built with humility narratives, stay with our channel and help the work travel. If you liked the video, then like, share, comment, and subscribe.